Okay. I see that we're now streaming on live on YouTube. So I'm going to call the Board of Selectmen of Newcastle, Maine meeting to order. The date is April 6th. The time is 7:18. We're running a little bit late. So I want to just go over a couple of quick things before we jump into the rest of the agenda. We modified the agenda slightly. You'll notice we don't have the Pledge of Allegiance. Unfortunately, I don't have a flag in here that we can do the Pledge of Allegiance with. So until such time that we can meet in person again, we're going to remove that from agendas as long as we're doing meetings on Zoom. Also, we're going to modify the way we're doing public comments. And for the time being, while we're meeting on Zoom, we are going to accept public comments for items on the agenda or not on the agenda, but not during the actual meeting. We're going to ask that anyone that has a comment or a question, send it postal mail, send it to email to the town administrator, or call someone, one of the Board of Selectmen or the town administrator, and that's how we're going to be accepting public comments for the time being while we are sort of meeting this way. After reviewing that with John and asking some legal questions from our town attorney, we all kind of felt that that would be the easiest and fairest way for everybody while we have to meet this way. So that's what we're going to do. So those two things said, are there, we're going to move on to amendments to the agenda. I assume everyone's got the agenda in some form in front of them, maybe. You might have to flip around. But are there any amendments to the agenda? If yes, raise your hand. I don't see any, so we'll move along to, we don't have any minutes and we don't have any new business, so we're going to dive right into unfinished business. John, are you with us?
Yeah, I am.
All right. So I've unmuted you. At our last meeting in this format, the question was raised about the Lincoln Academy Hill Road reconstruction project and reviewing the options. We talked a little bit about it, and I asked you to look into it and report back to us, which you did. And I kind of want you to just kind of go through all that, tell us what you found, and sort of lay out a order of events. The goal, I think, of this conversation is for us to all understand what happened, because I think there's been some confusion about the process. It was a little bit of a confusing process, I will say that, because there was the bid and we changed the bid and it got confusing. I get that, but we all need to be on the same page going forward. So if we could just have you break it down for us, and then we'll open it up for discussion.
Okay, great. Well, yeah, so after the last meeting, as I said, it seemed, as Ben said, I think there was a need to really revisit that conversation and make sure everyone was, basically had everything before them so they could understand where we were and where we've been, I think, more importantly. So what I had done is I put together effectively a PDF of all the emails and minutes and important documents relating to that process, going back to really the bid opening phase, not so much the earlier sections where we were going through the public meetings and all that, nor even the conversation about how to extend the bid process. Remember, we had an original bid due date, and we ended up having to push that off because there were some concerns about openness of that process, and then there were concerns about unit quantities and whether that should be part of the bid. And so, anyway, long story short, that's not really part of this. So what I put together basically is emails that I'd received and shared with the board, as well as the minutes and so forth. And then, of course, in the email that I'd sent to each of you about what that was, I also included the Vimeo link, which is effectively what LCTV had uploaded to the web of the meeting in question. Really, I think it was really the operative meeting where there was obviously, I think all 5 of you were present, as well as it was really the most fully throated conversation about options. And I think that that meeting was I think a good estimation, and really what something that was referenced by a number of you as we went through that. So again, what the I kind of lay out through that the series of those events, going from a discussion, a vote on the notice of award, and which included those options. Obviously, the link to that, so you could see the dialogue and how how that decision came to be from the five of you, or I guess four of you at that point, because Wanda wasn't yet part of the board, hadn't been elected as of that point. And then notice of award, the meeting on the 11th, which is actually after the notice of award was sent, a copy of the contract, proposed contract, then and then as well as the on was it was the day when Joel had questions at the meeting earlier that week about whether or not clarity as to what was part of the contract, what wasn't. So that's the
All right, hold on a second. I'm having trouble hearing John. He's cutting in and out, and now he's frozen entirely. Is that true for everybody? All right, so let's pause for a second. I've actually, there he goes. He's been having some problems with his Wi-Fi. I'm going to unmute him again, and there he is. He's been having troubles at
I
home
don't know.
with his
Sorry.
with his internet router. I've encouraged him to replace it. I understand that there's something in the mail that should arrive this week. So
Yeah.
unfortunately, I have to ask you to repeat some of what you just said.
Okay. So I don't know where I left off, but basically, the link had everything in it in terms of the video, so you could see that conversation. I pulled out the timestamps really of when that conversation took place, and then secondly, really uh, the well, I'd say the paperwork, the documents relating to everything after that meeting on the 28th, as well as I think the email that I'd sent to each of you about Joel's question at the meeting on earlier, I guess early December, maybe the last meeting in November. Joel had asked the question about, what was it, what was part of this, and so also that email is in there too, so you could have a chance to kind of refresh kind of where we were. Um, so hopefully that gives you a sense of the how we got to where we are, or where we were, but also the context through watching the video of understanding, how different people came to where they came from, and where their um, how the decision came to be made on that night of the 28th.
Okay, thank you, John, and thank you very much for doing doing all the research and going back and looking at the video and everything like that. I did have a chance to review the video. I hope some of you did as well, and I understand, based on all the information that you've given us, that I believe the crux of the issue, or the crux of the sort of question about all of this, is when can we modify options on the project, what time and what date? And it really comes down to, I think, Andrew's answer to my question that you referenced in your email. It was vague at best. He seemed to indicate that there would be some way to do that and modify the options and work with the local contractor he was talking about. And I think we all took different perspectives away from that conversation as to what those options were and what those modifications that could be made later would be. And I think before I open it up, I'll just say that ultimately what ended up happening is we did go ahead. Well, I see John moving there. You still with us? You're looking for better Wi-Fi signal. Okay. We ended up signing, agreeing to sign the notice of bid award of the bid award to Hagar Enterprises, and then we went forward from there. And there was no further discussion about options at any point after that I know of. We signed the contract. We actually asked Andrew for him to write the contract with the options in it that we approved, which he did. And then we signed it, and there was never any follow-up discussion at any time. So that's kind of where we are, and that's kind of where it's been sitting. From my perspective, I thought this was done. I thought we'd done it, and I thought we had, until we got into the project and there was the possibility of the contractor coming to us and saying, okay, well, here's how it's going. You know, we're in the middle of this. We've encountered this. We're able to save a little money maybe by doing this. Maybe we can swap this option out for that option. That's where I thought we were, and that's where I thought his options that he was talking about is like once we got into it, and the contractor was like, okay, now we can, you know, it's going well, or oh, it's not going so great. We hit ledge, or we didn't hit ledge, and boy, it's not as bad under there as we thought, and it's going to require less fill. We've got a little extra money. Let's talk. That's where I think I felt it got left, but the project hasn't even started, so there hasn't been any need to bring it up because the project hasn't started. So again, thank you, John. At this time, does anyone else have anything to say? Wanda, hold on, I'm gonna mute myself.
I guess I just feel like I wasn't part of the board then. I was at that meeting, and I really, perception is everything. You can assume things, and I certainly. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Wanda. Go ahead.
Okay. So I guess I was assuming, because I wasn't a member of the board then, by being at that meeting, that this would be talked about later on. I guess when we signed the contract, I assumed that was just the contract, that it was a formality, that we still had the option because of what Seth and Andrew both said at that meeting on the 28th, that we still had can look at stuff. If that's not the case, I'm incredibly disappointed in the whole process. And I don't know where to go with that. I'm just incredibly disappointed that I think there's a lot of people who wanted to talk more about the lighting in the granite curbings and things like that, and the sidewalks, where we were going to put them. And obviously, I just would like to see how everybody else felt after they saw that. Did anybody else feel that same way, other than just me?
Okay, hold on a second. Thank you, Wanda. I'm going to mute you, and I'm going to unmute Carolyn. Hold on. There you go, Carolyn.
Hi, I agree with Wanda. I was on the impression that we could still talk about the lighting. We could talk about the granite. We could talk about the width of the sidewalks. I thought we signed the contract just to give it to Hager, but we kept on saying we could modify, and we can talk about it before these things came up. And yeah, I'm disappointed in this too, because I have looked at the whole situation, and I've gone, you know, past Academy Hill a lot, and I don't think we need all that lighting. And I don't know exactly what was ordered for the granite, but I've counted 12 pieces that is there now, and I'm hoping that's sort of what we stick with, and we're not lining the whole road with granite, because that would be very expensive, and that's not what I thought. I thought, again, we could modify that.
Okay, hold on a second. Joel, go ahead.
Am I on?
Yes, you're on.
Yep. Okay, good. So my recollection of the whole, I watched the video where we were discussing the contract and the options with Andrew, and the options that we discussed were the granite minus the 160 feet that was removed, the lighting bases minus the lighting across the from the tracks down to Mills Road. And at the meeting, Andrew, when you asked that question, the way I interpreted it was Andrew said that there would potentially be an ability to do that because it's a local contractor, but that wasn't ever put in the contract. And we had the contract in our packets the night that we signed it. I read the contract. I don't know if anyone else did, but I read it and saw that everything was in there. And when we talked about authorizing it and signing it, I mean, there was no discussion. I think I again brought up options that we're just going forward with this for the 1.7 whatever million dollars, and everyone agreed who was there. It was at another meeting that I think it was either Wanda or Carolyn said something. I felt like maybe they didn't understand what was going on. So I brought it up again at another meeting. John sent out that email, which clearly defined what all the options were that we had agreed to, and asked if everyone was fine with that. And when I talked to John about it, he said he got no response. So I'm not really sure what we were supposed to do to make it clearer, but I thought it was pretty clear. I understood it. We agreed to the contract, and we I brought it up again because I just wanted to make sure everyone was all on the same page, and I don't know what else we could have done to make it clearer at that point.
Okay, hold on a second. Yep. Wanda, yes.
I guess maybe I'm just naive because I'm new to the board, but I don't remember Joel or anybody else, and maybe I just perceived the contract was that, yes, we were going to sign for that amount of money, but that in no means meant we had to spend that amount of money. So maybe, again, I'm just naive. I'm new to the board. I still thought that, just signing that contract didn't mean that we were going to have our feet held to the fire for everything in it, that we had the option of not spending all that money. And I still assumed there was going to be another meeting. And like I said, and obviously Carolyn kind of felt the same way. So I kind of feel a little bit better that it wasn't just me feeling that way, that, there was some misunderstanding.
I don't, Brian, John, do either of you want to weigh in before I talk again? I want to give everyone an opportunity to say something. Brian, go ahead.
Originally that was the plan, right? I remember it that way too. We're looking at those options for lighting to make changes and curbing. But I think when it went back out to bid for the second time, and the bid was actually changed and these things got written in stone, no pun intended, that's when we kind of got locked into this stuff. If we hadn't gone back out and rewritten it because residents were unhappy with who bid and who didn't bid, things changed. And believe me, I would have loved to have rather had it the other way around, because I would have loved to have had the option. I'm still on the lighting, waiting what John's committee comes back with for the street lighting, and and do we need to spend $156,000 in curbing? I don't know. So, but that's what I remember happening, is we did have it originally with Seth that once we signed, we could make changes with Hager's, and then after the bid got rewritten, it all changed. So.
Hold on just a second. Wanda.
So I guess, like I said before, I'm incredibly disappointed, but I think we as a town can still make changes. There may be a change penalty, but how much is that? Is that going to be, I can't imagine that's going to be for the full amount of what it would be to do this stuff, number one. And number two, in the last month and a half, things have changed in the world. And if we can save money in any place that we can, God help us if we don't. I think we don't know where we're going to end. On the news tonight, they said, brace yourself. This is going to be the hardest times of our lives. We've never seen anything like this. We don't even know where this is going. And I, in good faith, just can't sit here and not fight for saving some money where we can. We need a road, and I get that, and I don't question that at all. But does it have to be the best road going? I think we can save some money, and that's what we should be doing. And if we have to pay a penalty for change, then so be it.
All right, Joel, hold on a second here. Yeah, go ahead, Joel.
I just think, again, the point that needs to be looked at is that we all had the contract. We were all supposed to read the contract. Every time we get a packet, we're supposed to review all the information in it. That's our duty as selectmen. It was very clear in the contract what the options were. It listed everything out. It said everything that was involved in that. We agreed to it. I think that the comment about saving money would be really short-sighted to start. We've just started this program where we're trying to do a better job with all of our roads so that they last longer and we have to do less maintenance in the future. And I think to just react is not a great idea. It's not what our job is. It's not how we're supposed to do our duty. But again, I brought it up at 2 other meetings about the contract, about the options. We've had multiple emails about it. And I mean, if it comes down to, doing your homework and responding to this, to all the stuff. So that's just the way I see it. I think we should just go forward.
So I think at this point in the conversation, it's clear that there was obviously different takeaways from that conversation with Andrew and what happened when we were talking about awarding the bid and what options could be changed when. Obviously, there was a clear misunderstanding. However, where we are right now is that we've signed a lump sum contract with Hagar to rebuild the road, and it does include the options that we talked about, which was the granite curbing minus 160 feet, installing the lighting bases but not the lights. We removed, I think, I want to say 2 or 3 of the other crosswalk intersections that were originally proposed. So we had done what I felt was due diligence in scoping out the project and removing what at the time we felt was unnecessary construction costs from the scope of the project. And I felt that, honestly, since I hadn't heard anything about it and nobody raised any concerns since that meeting, that we were good. I was honestly operating under the assumption that once we got into the contract and the into the construction phase of the contract, and the contractor came back to us and kind of reported and said, hey, maybe we could save a little money by doing this or by doing that. And that's the benefit of having the local contractor. And I guess that's what I kind of thought Andrew was speaking to. And I could be wrong, but again, what I took away from that meeting is obviously different than what other people have taken away from the meeting. So I think in the future, we just need to be more clear, and it's a good lesson, I think, for all of us. Whenever we're signing any kind of contract, we just need to be aware of what type of contract we're signing and what the options and conditions are. As to whoa, what's going on? Why did that do that? Hold on a minute. Hi, John, did you do that?
Yeah, it was an accident. Sorry, hit the wrong button.
Okay, sorry. Sorry about that. That was confusing. The screen just went all crazy. And I completely lost my train of thought. I lost my train of thought. Don't even know what I was saying. So Brian, you remember what I was saying?
No, you're just talking about Andrew. But I was just going to say, there's always the chance that if the curbing hasn't been ordered, we could probably still have that conversation with Hager Enterprises. As long as stuff's he hasn't physically purchased it yet and it's not being delivered, there's still that option. It's still Hager's, it's still Seth
Thank
and
you.
Justin. So
Yeah, so that's what I was gonna say is that I mean, after reviewing the contract, obviously, there's a clear change order process. It's gonna cost 15% of whatever the change order is to enact it or remove it or whatever the case may be. But I think if there is feeling amongst the board that we should approach Hager Enterprises about changing the contract, that's something else, and we should definitely do that if that's the will of the board. It'd have to be a discussion somehow. We'd have to have that discussion. I'm not sure how to make that happen, to be honest with you. I think we'd have to get him in here, maybe at our next meeting. I don't know. We'd have to explore that. But for now, I think what we got to do, unless anybody else has anything that they want to say that hasn't already been said, I think we need to move on with the rest of our agenda. And I want to thank John for putting together the review of everything. And again, I don't know if this has clarified anything for anybody, other than to say that I know that there was confusion, but that we also kind of are where we are at the moment. So I don't see any hands, so we're going to move on to 5.2, which is the letter to the community regarding the COVID-19 and road projects. Brian started a draft of a letter and sent it to me for thoughts, and then sent it out to the rest of the board. I thought this was a really great idea to reach out to the community, put something in the paper, maybe put a note on the town website, just to let people know, we're here. We can't necessarily do a lot for you, but here's what we know, and encourage everybody to be safe and be smart, and also let them know that we do have these road projects up and coming unless anything changes, and we haven't heard anything from our contractor that they are going to change. This is where we are. So I did some edits. I sent it back to Brian. I wasn't sure if he edited it some more before I sent it out to everybody, but I thought it was, in general, it was a very good letter, and I think it'd be a good idea to do that. Does anyone have any feelings about the community letter and putting it in the paper and posting it on the website and everything? Oh yeah, Wanda, hold on a second. Yes.
I didn't see the second edit one. Did it come out?
Hold on a minute.
You said that you edited it, you and Brian, and sent it back out again?
Oh, hold on. No, yeah. He sent me the first one, and then I edited it and then sent it back to him, and then he sent that one to you guys, I think.
So that was the second one.
That was the second one. Yeah.
Okay, I was gonna say I only saw one, so.
Yeah, I think Brian, is that correct?
Yeah, that should be correct, because
Okay.
I think it was actually labeled and might have even said Ben's edits on the name.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I saved it that way so that you'd know that it was my
Yep.
edits. Yeah. Okay. Any thoughts about the letter? I'd like to ask John to put it in the paper if he can, and post it on the town website and maybe the Facebook page and wherever else, and just get it out there, let people know. Yep. Hold on a second, Wanda. Yep.
I think my only concern is, obviously, we're gonna move forward. I think most people know how I kind of feel about that right now, but, I've talked to a bunch of people about that, but my bigger concern is that this virus is spreading, and I don't want to keep making it about the virus, but I live this every damn day, and every day my life is, policies are changing faster than I can make them happen. And I went by 2 construction sites today on my way to work, 2 different companies. None of them was showing distance isolation. I mean, there's 2 or 3 people standing around chatting, or it's shoulder to shoulder. And the only thing I ask, if they start this project, please, I know you got to do your work, but this virus is not going to stop if we allow people to stand, face to face or shoulder to shoulder and do your work. Essential business has to happen, but that doesn't take away either masking or social distancing from that equation. So, and like I said, I don't want to make it all about this, but it is about this because our lives are impacted by this every day. And this has to happen, people, because it just infuriates me when I go by people that aren't doing it.
No, that's good. That's great. And I think if maybe John, I'm going to unmute you and just ask that if you could check in with Hagar about the time frame for when they think they're going to be doing any work on any of our town roads, and just pass along Wanda and our concerns that that I know that they are probably trying to do everything they can, but just encourage them to review it all and please be as safe as they possibly can for themselves, but also for our residents. And I think that's a really good idea. We should all be checking on everyone all the time. I completely agree with Wanda. It infuriates me when I see people who are just sort of throwing caution to the wind. Those are the dangerous ones. So hold on a second here, Brian. Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, I did talk to Seth the other day and wanted to address your concerns. I asked him how they were doing with that. And he said they're following to their best of their abilities, all the CDC guidelines. He's not worried about his equipment operators because they're pretty much isolated to themselves inside the vehicles. It's pretty much the guys in the ground, and he's trying to keep them separated as much as possible. And hopefully they'll go to start wearing face masks when they're working with each other. But for what good that might do with the cloth face mask and the dust and dirt. So.
Okay, thank you. I had a conversation with John earlier, who I believe you had you were talking to someone at I don't remember if you're talking with, it was either the road commissioner or someone at the DOT, and they're full steam ahead right now. Their plan is go. I think I heard from someone they actually appropriated an additional $50 million to continue working on road projects. And so yeah, it is. They are out there working, and I think it's a really good thing to let our residents know, like, under normal circumstances, you might be tempted, especially since you're home, to step out your front door and go chat if they're standing near your house or in front of your house or on the sidewalk. Please don't do that. Let them do their work and keep your distance. Do you have anything else to add to that, John?
Well, yeah, I reached out over the last couple of days to some of the folks who run some of the other towns in the mid coast to ask, how are they dealing with this? Are they putting a stop to different orders? Are they pulling back on some road plans? I only heard back from 4 of them. Admittedly, it was the weekend, so I don't blame them. But from the 4 I did hear from, everyone was moving forward with plans they had. Some had said that they were hoping to get more done, but in one case, actually this was North Haven. He said, the concern they have obviously is keeping that physical distancing issues and trying to ensure that you can accomplish that. And that's the name of the game right now, is trying to maximize that as much as you can. And so it's a little bit different. Whereas, here we have a private contractor who we're hiring to do a job. And so there's a little bit of an arm's length situation there that we have. Whereas if these were employees working for us, obviously we'd feel differently. But in this case, obviously we would try to do, we would have to have a pretty strong hand in terms of how we want to face that with our contractor. I mean, kind of like as Brian had said, we really just make that an issue and make that a primary concern of us, because this is, though we don't have our own town crew who works for the town, when they're working on town roads, there is a standard and an expectation, I think, that people have, that this is sanctioned by the town. And so the last thing we would want is have folks doing work on the road on our behalf and not following those CDC standards and guidelines to the T as much as we can. I mean, if we're not doing that, then that really sends a bad message. So we need to, that's, if we're moving forward, that's something that we're going to really need to impress upon Seth, and then of course he needs to impress upon the people who are working there.
Okay. Thank you, John. All right. Does anyone else have any other comments, questions, concerns about 5.2, the letter to the community? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and we'll have John send that out and post it in all the appropriate places. So we'll move on to item 5.3, the Academy Hill project borrowing RFP. And again, I think I'll turn it over to John because I think he heard back from a couple of the financial institutions that we asked him to talk to regarding the RFP. So what did you hear?
Well, at your last meeting, I think the concern had been raised of, is this, potentially, are there more items available for us to take into consideration if we were to, borrow or to use this as an opportunity to borrow? And, oddly enough, actually, I as I said, I'd had a chance to reach out to the first and DB&T since that meeting. I did not hear, though I did hear back from DB&T. They expected, Ken was expecting to get back to me by noon today, and that just didn't happen. I did hear back from Sarah Tolman from the first. She's actually said that the rates had gone up since they had actually submitted their RFP to us. So while we had thought that it actually had gone down a little bit more, her expectation was actually what we had in hand was actually our best offer. So at that rate, that would actually put the first as the lowest of the bids that we received.
So do you have a recommendation for the board at this time? I think what we had asked last meeting 2 weeks ago was for you to contact the banks, see if we had a better rate, and that if not, we were going to be prepared to act tonight. Is that your understanding, and do you have a recommendation in that regard?
Yeah, I would. Yeah, so looking at it and weighing all of the options, initially I was looking at low bid, which was from the first, and originally I was looking at the 7-year term. In retrospect, and in looking at where we are right now, I think it probably is best to push that out over the 10-year term, have a lower first year amount. And when I say first year, I'm not talking about the coming budget year of 21, but actually 22. Try to spread out this, again, raising some of the concerns that Wanda has, not knowing what's going to happen with the economy over the next 2-3 years. I think that is a little bit wiser rather than trying to take a bigger bite now. So push that over a 10-year term at that low rate of 1.9.
1.9. I don't have that. Unfortunately, I didn't pull that document up in front of me. You have it? Sorry, Brian. Can you just remind us real quick? Was it 1.9 over 10 years?
It's 1.92 over 10 years.
And the 7-year was the 1.73.
7.3.
Okay, great.
Correct.
All right, thank you. Hold on. Yep, I'm moving over here to Wanda. Yeah, Wanda, go ahead.
So I guess I think that's great, and I'm assuming, and there again, I'm gonna stop assuming, because obviously that gets me in trouble because I misunderstand. But in most of these things, especially today, there aren't any prepayment clauses. So we get out 5 or 6 years and things are going well. Am I right in thinking that we'd be able to pay that off a little quicker if that came to be, without any penalties?
John?
Yeah, there is a prepayment provision. It may be prepaid at any time after August 1st. So if the town were to win megabucks, and that's how we wish to spend it, that would allow us to prepay.
Okay, without a penalty.
After August 1st.
Okay. All right, great question. So my thoughts actually kind of tracked the same way, was that 7 years was a pretty sweet interest rate, but over the 10 years, Brian, did you do the math? I'm going to unmute you. Did you do the math on the differential?
I did it in front of me. I want to say it was about $75,000 between the 7 and the 10 overall.
Okay.
So
So it's $25,000 a year for the last 3 years additional cost by pushing it out to 10 years over doing the 7-year note. But what that affords us is a certain amount of flexibility and a little bit more security in terms of a lower yearly payment. And just while you have it in front of you, can you remind us again what that yearly payment over 10 years is? The annual payment?
I don't think this one says it. This one has the interest.
Hold on, John's got it. I'm gonna.
Yeah,
mute
so
him.
it's 230 is the 230 409, and then it declines every year after that. So
Okay.
and actually in the first budget year, it's only at interest only in the first budget year that we would pay.
So in the budget cycle that we're going to be discussing tonight and going forward, that we're developing for starting in July, it would be an interest only payment on a line of credit, which is how we had asked for it. So we'll take it as it's spent. We'll only pay the interest for the first year, and so FY21, the budget after this coming budget, will be the first year that 230 will hit. Is that correct?
22.
FY22. FY22.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
The FY21 will have interest only, and the FY22 will have the full payment, which is roughly 228 or so, 229.
Okay. Did I see your hand up, Carolyn? No. Okay. All right. So I think I'm gonna mute you there for a second, John. I think at this point, the question is whether or not someone would like to make a motion that we either accept the RFP as is, or we wait for some other process. It's either an amount of time or something, but I think a motion one way or another to act on the RFP that we've put out, either we're going to discard it and wait, or we're going to accept it and move forward. And I think that's where we are. And so I think we need a motion from someone for one of those things to move forward. And I'm going to recognize Brian, who's got his hand up.
Sure. I'll make the motion to accept the RFP from First National Bank on a 10-year term at 1.92%.
Okay. So we have a motion, and do we have a second on that motion? Joel seconds. All right. So at this time, I'm going to open it up for discussion. Do we have anything else we want to discuss in regards to choosing the first at that rate over 10 years for this project? No hands? Brian, hold on a second. Yep.
That's the only thing we could state, as John was saying, it looks like on here, the interest payments for 21 would be February 1st and then August 1st. So we wouldn't be making any payments on this until February. Interest
And then
only.
only one interest payment within the coming FY21 budget cycle.
Correct. The second one would be in the August 1st of 21. So be in the 22 cycle. So.
Okay. All right. All right. Any other questions or comments about the motion? All right. So at this time, we're going to vote, and I just want to remind everyone, I'm going to unmute everyone, and then I'm going to go around and ask for how you vote. Just say yes or no. So we'll do it roll call style. All right. So in no particular order, just how you show up on my screen. Wanda, how do you vote?
Oh, I just having a hard time spending this money.
So your potential votes on the motion are in favor of, not in favor of, or you can abstain, just to remind you.
Yeah, I'm going to abstain.
Okay. Carolyn, how do you vote?
Yes.
Brian, how do you vote?
Yes.
Joel, how do you vote?
Yes.
And I also vote yes. So the vote tally is 4 in favor, 1 abstained. So we're going to instruct, I'm going to just mute everybody again real quick. We're going to instruct the town administrator to award the financing bid that we put out to the first. And I think at this time, we should also maybe entertain a motion to empower the town administrator to sign that contract on our behalf, since we can't all get together to do that. So I would entertain a motion for that. Brian moves it, and do we have a second? Joel seconds. Unfortunately, I gotta unmute you all, and we gotta go roll call again. Wanda, how do you, well, before we do that, is there any other discussion about empowering John to sign the contract with the first? No further discussion? Wanda, how do you vote?
Majority rules, so yes, I empower John to sign it.
Okay, Carolyn,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Joel,
Yes.
and I also vote yes, that passes 5-0. So John will contact the first, get the paperwork going, and then please, come back to us with a signed contract just to put in our packet. Let us know that we're good. Okay, moving on to item 5.4, COVID issues or continuing COVID issues and concerns, which actually comes to the reason we're having a meeting on an off night. Normally our selectmen's meeting would be the 13th and the 27th. I called this meeting because I lose track of the days now. I can't remember what day it was last week. The announcement came that we were going to be extended on the social distancing guidelines for at least until the end of April. And I started thinking about the time frame of everything and realized that the way that we have to prepare our the secret ballot portion of our town meeting, because we all go to vote the Monday before the Tuesday of open town meeting, we have to have those ballots printed and available for people 45 days prior to that secret ballot vote, which would put it sometime, I don't know the exact date, but sometime in that, I think, beginning of the 3rd week of April or the end of the 2nd week of April, basically right around the corner. And since we don't know today if we're going to even be able to have an open town meeting the way that we think we will, or if we're even going to be able to do secret ballot voting by having people come and vote at the fire station like we normally do, it just throws the whole thing into questions about time frame and realistically, how are we even going to potentially have a town meeting? This is problematic, mostly because town meeting is where we need to pass the budget in order to be able to commit taxes in order to keep the town funded. That being said, we're still operating in a budget. We still have plenty of money in the bank. We have a good general fund amount. We're in, we're finishing up our budget, where we'll be finishing up our budget at the end of June. So we're funded through the end of June. It's just then the question of next year. So a couple things that we know are possible options, I guess. And what I really wanted to do was to sort of lay it out for everybody and then open it up for a discussion. And I'm not really looking for any decisions right now, because I'll be honest with you, I don't think there are any good decisions that we can make right now. As Wanda said earlier, the situation just keeps changing every day. We don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. We don't know what next week's going to bring. We may get more guidance from our state legislature about how we can do things. There's been a lot of discussion about town meetings and whether or not the legislature will amend the way that we do absentee ballot voting to allow municipalities to just send an absentee ballot to all town residents as the voting method for annual town meeting. And I know that's kicking around in a lot of people's brains, and it's being talked about, in higher circles than us. And so we may get some guidance on that. Right now, we're not allowed to use that it's not a viable voting method. We're legally not allowed to just send someone an absentee ballot the way the law is written. They have to request it before we can send it to them. So there's that issue. And then there's just the general issue that even if everything clears up And by the end of May, everything's rosy and we're all back to work. We pray we are. I think we need to ask ourselves, are our residents going to feel comfortable, at ease, willing to put themselves in a room with a questionable number of other people in the middle of June to have a town meeting? And I can't speak for anyone else, but I know that I myself would be very hesitant at this point, and it's only the beginning of April. So that's kind of where we are with that, and that's the reason I kind of wanted to bring it up as a point of discussion, because if we're going to change and do something, the options that we have before us are, we have the authority as the Board of Selectmen to change the date of elections. We have the authority granted to us every year to change the day of town meeting. And I'm not saying or suggesting that we do either of those things, but those are tools that we might have to use. Pushing it out a certain amount of time might make sense. It's not ideal. Could we do it? Yes. There are other concerns that come along with it, but it's a possibility. The other part of that, as you can see on the agenda, is the town report. We can go ahead and prepare the town report as normal in the normal time frame. We should at some point discuss the possibility of just simply mailing a copy of the town report to all the town residents if we think that's an important or necessary thing to do. Normally, we encourage people to stop by the town office and pick up a copy. Obviously, we don't want to do that. So that's kind of where I was, and again, I'd love to know what all of you think. I'm not trying to raise an alarm, but I do think it's important for us to recognize and maybe just discuss and let our residents know in advance that there may be a different process this year for town meeting or at a different time frame, or whatever the case may be. Does anyone have any ideas, anything they want to share, or any comments or concerns about any of that? Brian?
Just in the town reports, I agree with you. I don't know what we're gonna do with town meeting and the June vote. The town report, I think we probably have money in the fund somewhere. I think we should just do the mailer to every resident. We used to do it. We cut back to save money, because we send out 1,000 of these things and we get 55 people to the town meeting. So, but I think we probably should just look at that when we get it printed this year, just get it mailed out to general mailboxes, Newcastle.
Like an all mailer.
Yep, like an all mailer.
All right, Wanda, yes, go ahead.
And I know we're sending this one letter out to the thing, but maybe we could have a follow-up letter and we can talk about it maybe at the next time or as it gets closer, to just let the townspeople know that we're thinking about this. It's an ever-changing thing. But just to let them know, it's still on our radar, and we're not going to let it all, we can't let it all drop, obviously. But I think just so that just a little, whether it be a letter to the editor or something, in a few weeks, just as it gets closer. In a few weeks, we may know more too, but just to let them know that, it's kind of in flux. We know it's in flux, and we'll keep them posted just so that they're in the loop.
Yeah.
Just a thought.
Yep. No, that's a really good point. Maybe during this time, a letter either directly following our Board of Selectmen's meeting to go in the paper or something like that, just to kind of keep people updated. More information is not a bad thing. Carolyn, go ahead.
Yeah, my thought was too, or add another paragraph to that letter. I mean, sending
Well, just
two
one.
out, sometimes, they won't be looking for it, but if you add another paragraph to the letter that was already drawn up, stating something about, coming up the election and town meeting, and might be a good idea too.
Yeah, we could add just a quick sentence or two that my
You're
concern,
right
I
at
guess,
the bottom.
right at the bottom, just say, look for more information coming regarding, plans for elections and town meetings in June, because that process may need to change. That's a great idea. Yeah. 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 John, go ahead.
So I think one thing we have to also remember is we're one cog in a big wheel that's going on here. And so while we certainly have a town meeting, we have our votes that we have in June. There's a statewide primary that's supposed to occur on that same day. So there needs to be a big decision made by the Secretary of State's office very soon as to what they're going to do with that election. We saw right now there's a lot of debate, and the Supreme Court actually weighed in on this primary that's going on in Wisconsin as to how to handle that. And I think we're, as a society, also starting to talk about what does vote by mail mean? How do we do that? What's right? What's wrong? And the ability to pull off something like that, maybe a short timetable, is tough, but these are tough times. So we're forced to confront a whole bunch of things that we don't probably want to have to even think about. But here we are. So I think you're right. I think this is really a conversation about what's to come, what could be coming, what are some ideas, how do we get there? But we're also, whatever the state does is going to push a large part what our options are. I think that if we had a strong desire to go one way or the other, I think that's something that needs to be brought forward to the powers that be in Augusta, because this is a situation where there isn't a plan. We're creating a plan. we're on the the ground level of whatever this is, and so as a result, if we have leadership that we want to exert, or we want to offer suggestions, if we feel that a vote by mail option is something that we should be considering, not just for ourselves, but for on a broader base, not just because of, we want to protect our staff. We want to make sure that our staff doesn't run into folks coming in as well. And that's, while that's 8 weeks out, that 8 weeks is going to go like this, I think. The last 3 weeks have gone fast, frankly. So I think, maybe we're not ready to have that conversation tonight in depth, but if we're, we need to, there's some decisions that are going to have to be made very soon. These absentee ballots need to be printed. We need to have our ballots printed. And that's an order that goes in within the next couple of weeks.
I agree with you, John. I wanted to raise it as a concern, and like you said, we needed to talk about it in a public setting like this one, so that people are hopefully aware. I know not a lot of folks are watching the live stream, but it's a good suggestion to include something in the letter that we're sending out. And let's go ahead and put it on the agenda for next week. At the end of the meeting, we'll discuss it, and that'll give us a week to sort of think about it and formulate some thoughts. I think it wouldn't be a bad idea if the state heard from some towns who had some opinions about how they'd like to see things happen. And just knowing what our demographic is in Lincoln County, I would strongly encourage us to all look into, research, and consider the vote by mail option as being something that we might be able to endorse and push up to the state for them to consider. Go ahead, John.
Now, one thing to also keep in mind is that, so the legislature took action before they adjourned to allow towns to operate within their budgets after the end of their fiscal year. So we're not forced to have a town meeting. We can operate as is within our existing budget lines. However, obviously that comes with its own constrictions as well. So if there's a pathway, obviously that's something we want to consider. Not saying that's what we want to do, but we want to consider it. But secondly, I think also the ability to operate, there's issues with vote by mail as well. Does it make sense to authorize, boards of selectmen? If we're looking for a legislative sentiment, does it make sense to authorize board of selectmen to operate as councils and have the ability to approve warrants and approve I should say budgets and ordinances, and then have to have some sort of reauthorization once we're outside of this emergency process? I mean, this is strange times are causing us to make up strange rules you know, and maybe that's one way to, we've talked about charter, we've talked about a whole bunch of different ideas about where Newcastle's town government is going. There's a lot of rules about how Maine's town governments are operating. We may want to offer some thought in that, and just to say, look, to get us through this period, we need to have some authority, because really, without a town meeting, this is as far as we can go in Newcastle. And to bring everyone together means either paper ballots or some sort of unique town meeting with social distancing, and like we saw in Bristol, which you know, I don't think that's certainly outside of what the governor and the CDC are looking for in terms of people congregating, even if there is that social distancing. So just a few thoughts.
No, that's good, John. I wonder if, I mean, you've kind of got your ear to the ground. I understand you've re-energized the managers, administrators mailing list. Maybe we could ask you to give us another report for next meeting, summarizing these options and sort of, you know, what you're hearing from, you know, your colleagues about, you know, where they're leaning, because there are a lot of different forms of government for towns of our size, and but a lot of them are in our exact same position. It'd be great to know what they're thinking. If you could reach out and just see what you hear back, and then give us another report.
Will do.
That would be great. Does anyone else have any other anything to discuss about any of the? Oh, I have one other thing. One other thing, because I saw it on the town report there. Prior to sort of all of this, John had made the recommendation that, or he was going to make the recommendation that we print the town report on a full 8.5 by 11, which I really liked the idea of. It'd be a smaller number of pages because you can get more on the page, obviously. It's a book size instead of that little tiny thing that you lose everywhere. So I think that's probably off the table at this point. If we're talking about having to potentially mail the books, we're probably looking at sticking to the small size. So anyone that might have had that thought kicking around, if they'd had private conversations with John, I think that's probably where we're headed. Okay, so the other reason that I called this meeting was to sort of talk about that, but also to start the FY21 budget process. So if you'll all bear with me, I'm going to attempt to share my screen and do a little PowerPoint presentation that I put together for a proposal for doing things a little bit differently this year for the budget, for a couple of reasons. Since we don't know how we're going to go with a town meeting in June, if we're even going to have a town meeting in June, my thoughts have been sort of centered around the idea that we have to keep things as simple as possible. I don't know what that really means at the moment, but at least in terms of putting the budget together, it coalesced around the idea that there might be a simpler way to do the budget than how we've always done the budget. And I'll explain that in just a second. So if you give me a second here, I'm going to attempt to share part of my screen. All right. Can everybody see that? Give me a thumbs up if you can see that. Yes. All right. Brian, did you turn your video off? There you are. All right. So great. I'm just going to move everybody over there. So this is where we normally start with the budget. This is the question we kind of start with every year. Before we've even looked at anything, before we know anything, we always filter into the town administrator's office and we say, is the budget going up or is the budget going down? Because we want to know what that's going to do to taxes, and we want to have some idea. The problem with this that I've discovered, having done this a few times now, is this is a really unhelpful question, and it's a horrible place to actually start a budget, because this causes anxiety throughout the whole process. And I think there's a better way to start the budget process instead of starting with this question. We should end with this question, not start with it. This, if everyone can see it, this is how we've always done the budget. As long as I've been here, we start by looking at each line of the budget. We get a spreadsheet. 5-6 years ago, I developed a spreadsheet that had literally every line item in it. We had reorganized the chart of account, which we've done 2 or 3 times now to help try and simplify the information that was there so we could understand it a little bit easier as we go through it. Some of you that have been with us a long time know that we used to just get a printout from Trio, which was basically unintelligible. It was impossible to understand. You really had to really know what you were looking for to understand the numbers. And trying to put them together in your head to make any kind of sense was very difficult. So then we developed a spreadsheet. And so then we'd start going through line by line, and we'd always follow this exact same process. We'd discuss each line as we got to it. And I can't be more clear than this. The way we would do this, and the way we did this last year, we've always done it, is using those past budget numbers in the spreadsheet, trends, advice from department heads. We just make a guess about a number. There's no magic to it. That's just how it works. But then we just sort of make those guesses, and we'd add them all up. And if we're unhappy with where we end up with that big number at the end, we'd go back and we'd do it all again. We'd go through the lines, and we're just looking for places to cut or trim until we get to something that we are happy with. This is an awful process. The reason I believe this is an awful process is because it's mind-numbing, number one, to just look at all those numbers and try and extrapolate any meaningful data from them. But what I found myself doing year after year after year of doing this is it took a certain amount of time of staring at those numbers and trying to understand the numbers, and getting the stories behind each of the lines of the numbers, because they've changed over time. The stories have changed about how we got to those numbers and what those numbers are comprised of. And oh, well, you know, this number over here is actually a composite of this number and this number minus this other number from over here. And you got to know that story to understand why that number may or may not make sense. It's a maddening process. And it took going through all of that to get to the point of developing in my own mind what the actual goal for the budget should be. And what I mean by goal is, and I'll use 2 years ago as a good example. We started by going through the process of looking at the lines, and probably halfway through the budget process, which is greatly reduced, by the way. We used to do like what, 8-10 meetings, Brian, on the budget, and we got it down to 3, which is great. However, it took going about halfway through the budget process before we kind of realized we actually had a kind of a golden opportunity to reduce the debt of the town almost to zero. And so then we started looking at the budget from that perspective. Can we pay off the remaining debt that we have? Does that make sense? What does it do to the budget? And that was a goal. It was a very clear goal. Let's pay off our debt. We took that goal, we reworked the budget, we went to town meeting and we said, this is our goal for the budget. We're going to pay off the debt. And everybody was like, this is a great idea. You have a clear purpose. You executed it. We're behind you. Some people who are, sort of lifelong naysayers at town meeting stood up and thanked us that year. I mean, it was crazy. So last year, because of where we'd gone with the budget 2 years ago, we were able to embark on a new goal for the budget, which was to invest in infrastructure. And we began a roads project to fund a roads project to do the maintenance and repair the roads that we'd been neglecting for years and years and years and years and years. And we'd just been haphazardly picking away at it as we could. And I'll get to that. So what I'd like to do is propose that instead of this process that you see on your screen right now, we actually do this process, which is that we talk about establishing a goal for the budget, like getting rid of the debt. We can't do that one because we already did it. And then we collect the budget recommendations from department heads, John, fire department, public works, everybody, build the budget. And then if we don't like where the budget ends up, the conversation, if we've identified what that major goal for the budget should be, the conversation would be, how do we realign the goals? It shouldn't be then, how do we pick away at the money? I think instead, a better approach would be for us as the Board of Selectmen to establish the goal and charge our department heads. And in this case, I'm talking about John as our financial department head, to make the budget work with the goal that we give him, and then come back and give it to us. And so what I mean by goals, I mentioned some of them. These are 4 that I thought of. They're just potentials. I'm sure that there are other good ones. They're just the 4 that I threw in here. But I'd like to have a conversation about what we feel is the most important goal for this year's budget cycle, and start from that perspective as we go through the budget, instead of trying to build it up line by line, because that perspective is maddening. So if we know in the back of our mind, we're building towards this goal, we've agreed on it, this is the goal for this year, and we're going to work towards it, and we're going to ask all of our department heads to work towards this goal and make this budget work, and give it to us this way, I think we'll have a much simpler, faster, and less painful budget process, to be honest. So I'll open this up for discussion after I kind of get through. I've only got 7 slides, so we're already almost all the way done here. For those of you who haven't been through a budget, and I'm just talking about basically wanting to hear at this point, but it's good refresher for all of us. This is how the budget is built. I wanted to build a little infographic because there's no mystery to how a budget is built, municipal budget. We basically add the municipal budget, which includes the 6 general categories that we've consolidated all the line items into: administration, operations, public services, safety works, reserve accounts, and debts. Those 6, and I'm counting public service, safety, and works as 3 different ones. Those 6 things, categories, broad categories, are really the meat and potatoes of our job in terms of developing the budget. The education budget, we add the education budget to the municipal budget, we add the county taxes to those 2, we subtract whatever we think we're going to get for revenue, and I've only listed 5 of them there, though we have more revenue streams. Those are just examples, and that's how we get the budget. I mean, it's really just basic adding up and subtracting. The largest portion of the budget by far is always the education budget. And the county taxes, while small, I've put padlocks on those because, just to show, we have no say over those. What we have say over, and we don't even have say necessarily over revenue. We can forecast what we think we're going to get for revenue, but we don't control it. We really only control the municipal budget, those 6 broad categories. So that's our focus. That's how a budget is put together. Just a quick review. Towards that end, when we go back and we have a discussion about goals, the things I know that we already need to talk about, I'd like to break them into 2 major categories and start having the conversation with a goal in mind about these 5 things, and that would be phase 1 of the budget process, which I'd like to start next week. We know we need to have discussions about plans for the annual public works and road maintenance, town manager salary, payroll for the rest of the town staff. We know we need to have a discussion about ambulance service, and we know we need to have a conversation about town website and software. A lot of other things in the budget are either static, change very little, don't require discussion on our part, and we should have every confidence that our financial manager can take care of them for us. If we can have a conversation about these things and give him direction about numbers to plug into the budget, then we can move to phase 2 of the budget discussion, which is this very simple worksheet. And this really is, in my opinion, the meat and the potatoes of the work that we as selectmen need to do for developing the budget, because this is really the big numbers. What was last year's total budget number? Before the capital roads project budget for the coming year proposal, what is this year's budget, which would include these 5 things that we need to give John answers on. So we take this number, we subtract this number, and then the question is, in order to keep the mill rate flat, and that's not a goal, that's just a question to give us a benchmark. In order to keep the mill rate flat, how much cash would be available to do capital roads projects? And then the question is actually, do we then need to adjust the amount of capital roads budget in order to meet the major goal that we decided on previously? I'm not assuming anything about any of these things. I'm going to open this up for discussion. I want to know you guys' thoughts, but my goal here is to have a very simple, easy, non-brain damaging method to the budget. If we can start by having a discussion about a goal, then move on to these general budget items, make decisions about those, then we can have a good conversation with our road commissioner, and we will have numbers where we can say, this is what we want you to do. You can develop your capital roads project based on this number, and that's real, that's real concrete advice or guidance for him to build his budget around based on what we want to see as a goal. And that's my spiel. That's my whole budget process idea. It's different than what we've done before. I understand that, but it's my last year and I'd like you all to humor me. So I'm going to, I don't know if I can, why can't I do this? It doesn't show up full screen. All right, I'm going to stop sharing that so my Zoom window comes back up. Oh no, I can unmute you. Okay, there we go. I'm all set. All right, so does anyone have any thoughts, questions about what I've just laid out? I know I just kind of rambled on for a long time and I'm sorry about that. Crickets? Total crickets. Hold on a second. I see, is that you, Brian? All right, go ahead.
I say, so I don't know. In my mind, I know the way we've done our budget over the past 10 years. I've been sitting here it's always looked like we've done line item by line item, but I think over the years, Ben, we've streamlined this, and this has actually been my viewpoint for the past 5 or 6 years, that we kind of set our goals. Like you said, that one year when we realized, oh, wait a minute, let's start clearing some debt. We set a 3-year goal to clear that debt. And we also, along with that, also set our goal to keep the mill rate as low as we could or stabilized for the next few years. So to me, this is kind of the process we've always followed, or I followed it in my head, the way I view it, you know, versus I understand that we've always gone through our town budget. How many pieces of toilet paper we're going to buy, you know?
Right.
And I agree, we never need to get that granular because that's on the town administrator, you know, and which John does a great job of presenting all those numbers to us anyways. He's proved that last couple of years that we've really streamlined this. We've also taken our whole budget process, and like you said, we used to go 8 to 10 meetings. We're down to 3 or 4. We've also redone Trio, 3 times now. So we've taken our budget lines from, God, I want to say there used to be 50 or 60 lines in our budget to 20 or so now. So I think it's a huge difference.
Oh, you mean in the annual town warrant?
In the town warrant, we had, God, how many we used to have to do? Well,
Well,
even
one
on
year was
even
62.
on our in our chart of accounts has drastically changed over the years. That's been some of our other goals, is to streamline those. So, but yeah, like I said, we might view it in a different way when we do this, but this has always been what's in my head. So I'm fine with you doing this way. This works.
Great. I figured honestly, as I was laying it out, I had exactly the same thought. This is where I've come to. I'd like us to start by having that goal conversation instead of sort of it being unveiled after beating our heads against the spreadsheets for a long time. Because I think it's pretty straightforward, honestly. Go ahead, Joel.
I just wanted to say, sort of following a little bit what Brian was saying too, as long as we keep the chart of accounts the same, you know, as we do the list, because there, you know, we'll still have that line by line item kind of thing. And if we keep those chart of accounts in the same format, it'll just be easier to track things. But other than that, yeah, I think it's a smart way to do it.
Okay. Anybody else? Carolyn, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree that this is probably a good way to go this year. I think it's gonna, I don't know if simplify it a little bit more, because we have cut it down year after year after year. We
Yeah.
seem to be simplifying it every year, so this could be a good way to go.
Okay. Great, thank you. Wanda, John, do either of you have thoughts before we have a conversation? Hold on, yeah. Go ahead, Wanda.
No, I was just gonna say, I haven't lived through a budget process like you guys have, but I think I like the idea of having a kind of an endpoint and working backwards. Just looking at the goals, I kind of already know where I want mine to be, my top goal. But yeah, I mean, I think without having gone through the whole process before, this certainly makes sense.
Okay. Great, thank you. John, do you have anything to add before I start? You do.
Oh, just real quick. I mean, just so everyone understands, I'm still building the budget the way we've always done it. So even though we're, the way that you're going to interface with it will be different, I'm still doing the same way because I need all that information to make sure it works the way it's supposed to. And so, though I think it's much more accessible for the types of decisions I'm relying upon the five of you to make. So that way I know what I need to do. I think that's the best way to look at this is for me, it's always that dance of, okay, I know what I'm doing on this end, but what are the goals? What are the aspirations of the board? Now that's what I like about this is it really allows the five of you to really set what's really important, what impacts the mill rate, what impacts what projects are done, what the bigger picture items that really I think all of you can put your hands into and feel good about at the end of the day that you're into. I'll worry about counting the toilet paper and the paper towels and all that stuff. I'll worry about that. But this is really I think a much more intuitive process for why someone would want to run for the board of selectmen and be a participant in. So the answers though to your questions that you've always asked or that you maybe haven't asked are still there. So I don't want you to feel as though that because we're doing it differently that those things aren't still being looked into. They are, but I think this is a much more healthy conversation in terms of how the five of you can get to a number that you're happy with.
So what I'd like to suggest we do, and I'll roll back here, is have a conversation tonight about what we as a board want to set as our primary goal for the budget this year, and then let it go for tonight, and then next week we'll pick it up with starting this conversation here. And if we then have time, we'll roll into this conversation here. It may break out over 2 meetings, but I would like to have the road commissioner involved, obviously, for both the public works and road maintenance annual part of the budget, as well as the capital roads side, which are separate items that need to be talked about separately. So that's kind of where I'd like to move us, is if we can just have consensus. We don't have to vote, but if we can have consensus on what the most important aspect, and we can just maybe go around and say what we feel is our own personal goal for the budget. We'll see if we've got something, and then we can discuss that. And then we'll begin the real work using this slide and this slide next week. And John will fill the numbers in for us as he can. And then after we do this, he can give us the spreadsheet after we've made those big decisions, and we can see where the numbers are that we've set a goal for. So does anyone want to start? Go for it, Joel.
All right. One of the things I've been sort of looking at for sort of more in depth over this past year has been sort of the infrastructure end of things, and not just, we think infrastructure, we think roads, but we have buildings in the town that we have, and they're not being maintained. They're requiring a lot of maintenance, and we're just sort of turning a blind eye to them. And I think I think the way to sort of look at this with the buildings for this next budget season is starting that maybe just putting some reserves. So I guess it's invest in infrastructure and build reserves. Setting aside money for this infrastructure, whatever direction we end up going. I mean, there's some possibilities for potentially, again, rather than spending good money after bad, looking at some different options as far as this, but getting those numbers together and sort of taking a look at that, I think would be wise. So one of the things I was going to try and do was just sort of put together an estimate budget for a lot of the work on the town office, especially. So in the historical society building, which is attached to it. So
in terms of either these goals or some other goal, though, just to clarify your recommendation for the most important part of the budget this year, the goal for the budget should be a combination of investing in infrastructure and building reserves to do so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think we've done that at all. We haven't really done that at all since I've been on the board, and buildings need it. So they're in pretty bad shape right now. So.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else? Brian, I think you had your hand up. You want to go?
Actually,
Yep.
I wanted to hear what Wanda's thought was.
Okay. Wanda, did you have your hand up? And I missed it. I'm sorry.
Well, no, but I'm happy to put it up. I think in this uncertain world, and we're just spending a lot of money right now, I think hold it and lower the mill rate, and wherever, if we can do that, and then look at what money we have to invest in these other things, that's all well and good. But I think for the town of Newcastle, we need to really try to hold that mill rate and keep the taxes where they are to our best ability over the next couple of years. And then whatever money we have left to invest in, whatever we have to invest with, I'm happy to do that. But I think we really gotta hold the mill rate. That's my number one.
Okay. All right. Brian, does that mean you? Oh, I'm gonna go over to Carolyn. Hold on just a second. Yep. Go ahead, Carolyn.
I am going to pick hold and lower the mill rate. I agree. It's going to be a tough year. I mean, if people are out of work and they don't get back on their feet till May, June, I think it's going to be tough for them to come up with taxes. I know we did move it, but I think October is still going to be tough for people when they're going to have to pay their full taxes in October. I think we need to spread it out a little bit more and maybe have people pay quarterly this at the end of the year. And it might catch up by October of 2021. But I think we need to lower or hold the mill rate.
Okay, thank you. That's actually an interesting idea. I don't know what would be involved with moving to, right now we do we send out bills once and it's got two payments stubs on it basically. And then we send out a reminder. Moving to quarterly is an interesting idea. I don't want to move into that discussion right now, but I think we should just maybe put a pin in that and bring it up again later on down in the budget line, budget process. I don't want to forget it. Go ahead, Brian.
Well, I was just going to back up that with Carolyn. John, correct me if I'm wrong. They can already set up payment plans, can they not? Besides the 2 annual payments that we send out.
Yeah, they can be part if they're paid up, if they're caught up,
Mhm.
they can be part of the tax club, which starts in June. which will allow them to do basically monthly payments starting in the summer and then through the rest of the year. And by doing so, it allows them to avoid any sort of penalties and the like. When I say penalties, I mean like, interest for taxes and so forth. So the tax club is an option for them, for anybody, again, who has paid up. So not for those who are behind and want to make regular payments. That's not the purpose for the tax club.
Right. Maybe that's something we just need to push and advertise a little more. So I think a lot of residents do not realize that's an option. So maybe we need to put that in the town report this year, or maybe with our next tax flyer. But as far as goals, we met all these over the years. You're 4 on here, Ben.
Yeah.
It'd be nice to come up with something new, because we've held the mill rate for 5 years, or not lowered it by 15 cents. We built up more reserves today than we ever used to have. We've cleared off all our debt except for 1 fire truck. And now, of course, we're going to have new debt for the Academy Hill project. So they all we have to pay attention to all these again. And I agree, if our primary goal is to hold the mill rate, then the rest falls into play behind it. If we're going to work backwards, I think we got to look at if we're going to hold it, what are we at, 17.5? If we're going to hold that, we got to work backwards that way. But we still need John's numbers first, so we can build off what we have left for infrastructure and reserves.
So I guess I would say that my personal opinion and my what I feel is my responsibility as a selectman are slightly different this year. And I'm going to just kind of rank them 1 and 2 because it's all I can do. I do feel like, as we've done for the past 5 years, the most important thing is probably holding the mill rate at its present level. It's been an interesting 9 years. 5 of those years we've been able to hold the mill rate while building reserves and paying off debts. And last year we were able to hold the mill rate while beginning to invest in infrastructure. That's a really interesting perspective. We were not able to invest in infrastructure at all before last year. It just wasn't feasible. And I think that part of our responsibility is to not abandon the road project that we began last year in its entirety. If we do that, we'll be doing our town a disservice, because it'll take that much more to get that project going again later, and may ultimately end up costing more, and it just defers maintenance on some roads that badly need attention and haven't had attention for years and years and years. So I'm a little at odds, but I think that if I had to rank them, I'd say if we can do what we did last year, which is hold the mill rate while continuing to invest in infrastructure, then I think that should really be our path forward. Our goal this year is to have a flat mill rate and put what we can towards keeping that road project going, and see what we can do about reserves for town buildings, because Joel is absolutely right. We've been kicking the can down the road on roads for so long. We've also been kicking the can down the road on maintenance on buildings. They're starting to rot out. There's structural and mechanical issues on buildings that we're going to have to face. Go ahead, John.
So there's 2 things I want to bring up that are related to this. And again, these aren't things you have to make decisions about right now. But first off, the mill rate in Newcastle has stayed level or gone down the entire time that I've been here. And that's great. That's a wonderful thing. I mean, that's a credit to the way you guys have built it before I got here, but through the period I've been here, we've been able to do some things and move the ball forward, I think. That's great. And I'm not suggesting that this is the year, but this is when I'm trying to take the other side. You play a little bit of devil's advocate here and only to say things likely cost more tomorrow than they do today. And so we have to consider that, and I don't know if this is the year, maybe it's next year, maybe it's 2 years from now, but I want it to at least to go on record that the costs are going to go up. And the idea that folks' tax bills will stay the same for 5, 6, 7, 8 years is just next to impossible, right? So next year, absolutely these are within goals, but I would just want you guys to hear that message that we've done a great job in leveling that playing field for a long time. And there's going to come a point in time when that doesn't happen. I don't think most people realize it's been that long a time where the mill rate has stayed level or gone down. So we've in that turn, it's been great, but there's going to come a time when that will have to end to be able to meet some of the other needs. So I want to say that. And on the other side of it, and talks about mill rate, remember we're in the middle of a revaluation. So next year, the new reval numbers will likely be part of your commitment. And so this is really like a one kind of snapshot year where all of this will happen. And then next year, we really don't know what will happen with the mill rate. Likely we'll find a lot more valuation on the land side of things that will augment and change. That doesn't mean everyone's mill rate will go down and everyone's taxes will go up. That's not what that means at all. What it means is that we'll be talking with just about a new paradigm. There's just a new framework to how we look at how the taxes in Newcastle are levied. So this is kind of like the last year under this, how this is all framed. Next year, there'll be a very different conversation. And talking about the mill rate will really be a different conversation. So for kind of looking ahead and looking to where we're going, really not about this year, but talking about maybe where we're going in the future. I just want you guys to recognize really where you've been, but recognize also that the ideas of being able to hold things level just are not likely if we keep going just in the world we are, where inflation and everything else seems to go up. So I just want to put that out there as more of a devil's advocate to this. Not that I think it's impossible. I mean, I've obviously started the budget and I know where we're heading likely, and I think it's very possible to hold a very similar mill rate to what you had last year, if not lower or the same. But there is, in the bigger sense, I'm just saying, keep in mind that what our history has been here is not common. It's very uncommon. So keep that in mind as we start to head down this road.
In that same time frame that we've held the mill rate or lowered it very slightly, other towns around us have seen massive jumps. Edgecombe went up over $2 last year. And that's just one town, but it's our direct neighbor. Wanda, did I see you with your hand up? Did you have a? No. Okay, sorry. Yeah, moving to Joel. Go ahead.
I also just wanted to add, I think one of the things to kind of keep in this budget goal concept is we've done a great job at building our unassigned fund balance, and I think sort of maintaining that is a good idea, but also looking at where that should be and making sure that it is an equitable amount in there, because we don't want to be keeping too much in there. But I mean, I think we're at a good place right now. I'd feel comfortable just keeping that, but just keeping an eye on that and making sure that is balanced
Great.
is a good idea.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point. Yeah. I imagined that we'd probably end up having that discussion at the tail end of the budget like we normally do, but you're absolutely right. It's a good point to bring up now so that we have an eye on that as we're going through. So I'm hearing broad consensus. Brian, give me just a second, and then I'll let you go. I'm hearing broad consensus that really what we need to do is hold the mill rate and then see what we can do for infrastructure after that. So I'm going to unmute Brian, but I think moving forward, adopting the goal that we are going to build the budget around the idea and provide guidance to all of our department heads that this is really what we're aiming for this year, holding the mill rate, and then give us that budget. So Brian, go ahead.
I just want to come back to Joel and the fund balance, and John can give better numbers than I can. Because if we're at 1.6 million, that puts us at what, about 15-16% of our annual budget that we have in our fund balance. And
Way more.
Huh?
It's like 30, it's like 30%, 33%.
yeah, so we're gonna have to look at this year spending some of that, pulling that out to either lower taxes or cover some of our expenses, because what's the top line we're allowed to have, John? There's a
Well,
percentage we're allowed to have in the bank.
it's there. The auditors want us to hold 2 months of expenditures. in
Right,
the
we
bank.
surpassed that a long time ago.
So we've almost doubled that. We're 4 months right now, which in the lights of what we're dealing with right now, we're as well set as any community could be.
Right.
In terms of cash flow and all that.
Brian, I think you were referring to the ordinance that we have, the finance and
Yeah, I'd have to pull it up, but there's a percentage in that.
It's either 12 or 15% at the top end, John. I can't remember which one it is. It's
Usually
referenced
15.
in the audit. Also, I would encourage everyone to since we got the audit and John sent it out in the email, read just the management letter, which is like the second portion of the audit. It has some really great information. You can find the unassigned fund balance amount there, as well as just an overall, snapshot of the health of the financial health of the town. And it does, I remember in that say what that percentage number is. It's either 12 or 15%. I just can't remember off the top of my head. So just bringing us back to the goal, and then it's coming up on 9 o'clock. So I think we're going to adjourn here in just a minute. But moving into the developing the budget phase of the budget next meeting, which is in a week on the 13th at 7. We'll start off by right here having discussions about these items, and we'll ask John to provide us with budgets and paperwork and numbers surrounding these topics so that we can have focused discussions about them and make some decisions and start there. We'll also invite our road commissioner to join us to discuss his part of that budget. So I think that's where we are. Does anyone else have anything else to say about the budget while we're on it? I'm going to go back and look at our agenda because I think we just about there. Okay, so seeing nothing else, I'll move down to the town. Oh, wait a minute, Brian.
Never mind, go ahead. Never mind, go ahead.
Good. All right. I'll move down to item 6, town administrator report and communications. John, do you have anything for us at this time, or are you holding off for next week, our regularly scheduled meeting? What's that?
I'm holding out on you until next week, so nothing this week.
That's fine. All right, so the last thing we have to do tonight, and I'm going to stop sharing the screen so that I can move you. There we go. We have a town warrant for, I think everyone received that in their email today from Shelley. Did everyone have a chance to review it? We have a town warrant for $20,721.78. Do we have a motion on the warrant? Brian moves. Do we have a second? Joel seconds. All right. So do we have any discussion about any of the warrant items? Is there anything on there that anyone had a question about? Just raise your hand. All right, no further discussion. So I'm going to unmute us all and we're going to go through the rigmarole of the voting again. So Wanda, how do you vote on the warrant?
I vote to approve.
Brian?
Approve.
Carolyn?
Approve.
Joel?
Aye.
John, you don't get a vote. I vote yes, that's 5-0. And I'm going to leave us open because we have no Board of Assessors or executive sessions. So a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Moved and seconded, so all in favor of adjourning the meeting? I'm going to take that by a show of hands just to be rebellious.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night. We'll see you in a week.
Good night, all.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.